Okay, today we are going to discuss interrupts in 8086. So, interrupt is basically a condition which makes the processor executes in ISR. So, whatever main program the processor is executing, if an interrupts occur, processor will suspend the execution of that program and will go and serve the interrupt, and then again it will start executing the main program. So, let's say here is the program. We have a program, the processor is executing a program, and suppose at some point of time it gets an interrupt. So here let's say we get an interrupt, so we write it as int n. This n can be between 0 to 255, so it has total 256 interrupts, so which is from 0 to 255. So what happens when an interrupt is occurring? So when the processor is going to see an interrupt, it has to go and execute the ISR of the interrupt. ISR is interrupt service routine. So let's say here is the ISR for the interrupt. ISR is interrupt service routine. So every interrupt has its own ISR. So before going to the ISR, before executing the ISR, what will happen? So the program was executing sequentially. This program was executing sequentially. How it executes sequentially? Because the IP value keeps on incrementing. So at this point, when this instruction, it saw this instruction, IP was containing the address of the next instruction. So after executing the ISR, we again have to come back and execute the next instruction. So we need this address. So we have to save this address somewhere before going to the ISR address. So first the processor is going to push IP onto the stack. So what will happen? Whatever is there in the IP, that will be stored into the stack, and then IP will be updated with the address of the ISR. So first this return address will be saved into the stack, then the processor will go to the ISR, execute the ISR, then there will be a IRET instruction, interrupt return. So this instruction will do what? It will pop this value from the stack, and this value is what? The address of the next instruction. This will pop into IP register, which is the value which is there at the top of the stack. So now this is how it will again come back to the main program and start executing the main program. Okay, but now here if you see that we have pushed and popped only IP. This means we are assuming here that this branch which is taken place is a intra-segment branch. Intra-segment means both the main program and the ISR, both are there in the same code segment, right? As you know that we have two types of branching in 8086, inter-segment branching and intra-segment branching. What do you mean by intra-segment? Intra-segment means both the programs are in the same code segment. Inter-segment means both the programs are there in the different code segment. So in case of interrupt, it is always considered as a inter-segment branch. Means the main program has a different code, is in the different code segment, and ISR is in the different code segment. So while going to the ISR, we don't have to push only IP, we have to push IP and CS both. So here we have to push IP and CS both, and similarly we have to pop IP and CS both, right? Similarly the ISR also, because it's there in the different code segment, so we have to update CS and IP both with the ISR address, correct? Now we will push CS first or IP first. So we'll have to see which one is more significant. So CS is more significant as compared to IP. So CS will be pushed first and then IP. See, suppose this is the stack, and assume that this is the top of the stack. This is represented by SP. So the next, this address will be SP -1. This will be SP -2, SP -3, SP -4. Now this SP -4 is lower than SP -3. Similarly, SP -2 address is lower than SP -1. So as we know that CS code segment is more significant than IP. So CS will be going to a higher address. So this is the higher address. So here CS will come and here IP will come. Now again CS is a 16-bit register and IP also is a 16-bit register. So that I can write as CS higher 8 bits and CS lower 8 bits. Again, where the higher bit will come and where the lower bit will come, we know that CS will come at this position. So again SP-1 is a higher address as compared to SP-2. So here CS higher bit will come, CS lower bit will come here. Similarly, IP address lower bit will come here and IP register higher bit will come here. Yeah, so this is how CS will be pushed first and then IP will be pushed. So while we are doing the pop operation, we'll have to pop IP first because IP is there at the top of the stack. So pop IP first. Once IP is popped, CS is there at the top of the stack. So then pop CS. Okay. Now we will see what is the ISR address. How to find the ISR address. So we know that we have total 256 interrupts. So we have total 256 ISR addresses will be there. So these ISR addresses are stored into the IVT. IVT means interrupt vector table. So this IVT is also there into the memory. This ISR addresses are also there into the memory. But what happens? These ISR are stored into the memory, but they are scattered into the memory. They are stored at some random locations. But this IVT is a continuous, it has continuous memory locations. So it is stored in the form of a table. So this IVT contains the addresses of all the ISRs. So to find the address of ISR, MUPI has to go to IVT, find the address of the ISR from the IVT and then go to that address in the memory to access the ISR. So basically when MUPI gets an interrupt, it goes to the memory twice. First it will go to the memory to get the ISR address. So this address it will get from the IVT, and then second it will go to memory to this address. So this is how it goes to the memory two times. First it will go to the IVT and find the address of the ISR, and then second time again it will go to that particular address which it has found from IVT to access that particular ISR. So whenever a MUPI is getting an interrupt, it goes to the memory twice. So now how the IVT looks like, that we will see now. IVT vectors the MUPI to go to the ISR, or gives the direction to the MUPI to go to the ISR. So the name IVT, interrupt vector table, because in the IVT it gets the address of the ISR. So now we'll see how the IVT looks like. So IVT, the address is fixed. So 00000H. This is the starting address of the IVT. So it is always stored at this location. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Then next will be 4, 5, 6, 7. So suppose for first interrupt INT 0. We know that it has like interrupts are from 0 to 255. So for INT 0, again now we discussed that it is always considered as an inter-segment branch. So we have to look for CS and IP, both the addresses. So so for this ISR, CS address and IP address both will be stored in the memory, and both the addresses are of 16-bit, and at one memory location we can store only 8 bits. So total 4 memory locations we need to store CS and IP both. So we need total 1, 2, 3, 4 memory locations. Right. So again the most significant more significant is CS. So CS will come at this locations and IP will come here. Again into the CS we have higher bits of CS and lower bits of CS. So higher bit of CS will come here, CS lower bit will come here, IP higher bit will come here, and IP lower bit will come here. So for INT 0, location number 0, 1, 2 and 3 are having the addresses. Similarly for next interrupt INT 1, location number 4, 5, 6 and 7 will be having the IP and CS address. Then again 4 locations we need for INT 2. So for INT 2, location number 8, 9, A, B will be having the value, the addresses for ISR of INT 2. Then for INT 3, C, D, E, F. So from C to F will be having the address for INT 3. For INT 4, after F we have 1 0, then 1 1, 1 2, 1 3. So up to 1 3 we will be having addresses for INT 4. Then from 14 onwards, from 14 INT 5 will start and up to INT 32. So last address will be 7F, 0007F. Then INT 33 will start. Sorry, this is INT 31 from 5 to 31, and then INT 32 will start from 00080 because 7F, after 7F we have 80 in hexadecimal, and then up to 003FF. So this will be INT 255. Okay. So the key point here is we need 4 locations to store the ISR address of every interrupt. Okay. So what will be the size of the IVT? So if we see from here, from this location, from address 0 to 003FF. So we have total 256 interrupts. Every interrupt is taking 4 memory locations, right? So 256 into 4 is 1 KB. So this is the size of the IVT. So IVT is 1 KB. Now here, if you see that for interrupt number, for INT 0, starting address is 0. For INT 1, starting address is 4. For INT 2, starting address is 8. For 3, starting address is C. So if I see, can we see a pattern here? So see, if this 1 into 4 is 4, 2 into 4 is 8, 3 into 4 is 12, which is C. Similarly, 0 into 4 will be 0. So first address is what? This n into 4. So next address will be n into 4 plus 1, n into 4 plus 2, n into 4 plus 3. Right? So if I say for interrupt number n, what will be the addresses? N into 4 will be the first address for this interrupt n. Next address will be n into 4 plus 1, then n into 4 plus 2, then n into 4 plus 3. So at this location n into 4 we will be having IP lower byte, IP higher byte, CS lower byte and CS higher byte. This is for INT n, for interrupt number n. Correct? So this we will write into our diagram here, into this diagram. So this ISR address, what will be the ISR address? IP will be what? N into 4 plus 1 and n into 4, and CS will be what? N into 4 plus 3 and n into 4 plus 2. Okay, so what we have seen till now is when we are executing a main program, if an interrupt occurs, the IP will contain the address of the next instruction of the main program, but the processor has to stop the execution of the main program and it has to go to the ISR. So to go to the ISR, it has to update IP and CS registers with the address of the ISR, but we need to store the return address somewhere. So it will first do push CS and IP, which is the return address. So it is storing them into the stack. Then it will update IP and CS ka value with the starting with the address of the ISR, execute the ISR, and then while returning it will pop the return address which is there into the stack, and it will come back to the main program and start executing. But before all of this happens, there's something else also will happen. So let's see what is that. So before even storing CS and IP, processor will clear TF and IF flag. Why the processor is clearing these flags? So let's understand that first. So if IF equals to 0, because processor is going to clear them, this means the interrupts are disabled. So what happens so it is a standard process followed by the processor. So whenever it goes to the ISR, it disables the IFR. So it executes only one ISR. It will finish that ISR. It will again come back to the main program. And so at a time, processor wants to do only one ISR. So here the processor has disabled the interrupt, but you as a programmer has the opportunity, or you as a programmer can enable the interrupt by using STI instructions. So STI is set the IF flag. So using this instruction you can again set it, right? So now we know that there are total 256 interrupts. So by making IF equals to 0, all of these 256 interrupts are not disabled. See, these interrupts are divided into two categories. So we have software interrupts and hardware interrupts. So what is the software interrupt and what is the hardware interrupt? Software interrupt means the interrupts which are given by the programmer by writing the instructions. So int n, where n is 0 to 255, right? And hardware interrupts means what? If a device is sending an interrupt or sending a signal, so it is called as hardware interrupt. Software interrupts are the expected events, while the hardware interrupts are unexpected events. They can occur at any time. So they can even occur at a time when we are not interested in them. So we can disable the hardware interrupts. But software interrupts we only have written, we cannot disable them. Now hardware interrupts, we have only two hardware interrupts. What are they? They are NMI and INTR. So suppose this is the 8086. So we have two hardware interrupts, NMI and INTR. So on these pins the hardware interrupts can come. Now processor is not sending the interrupt, processor is getting the interrupt. So the arrow is this side. So processor is getting the interrupts from the external devices, so from on these pins. Now out of these two, NMI and INTR, this NMI means non-maskable interrupt. NMI means non-maskable interrupt. Non-maskable means it cannot be masked, means it cannot be disabled. Okay, so out of those 256 interrupts, software interrupts cannot be disabled, only hardware can be disabled. We have two hardware interrupts, that is NMI and INTR. Out of that, NMI we cannot disable because this is used in the critical situations like overheating of the motherboard, which you cannot avoid. So in such kind of cases, critical cases, this interrupt is used, NMI, which cannot be disabled. So moral of the story is that using IF equals to 0, only one interrupt can be disabled, which is INTR. Okay, so this is clearing IF equals to 0. Now TF, trap flag. Trap flag is used for single stepping. Now suppose this is the program, this is your program which you are running. Single stepping means what? Suppose you want to see the output of every step of the program, so then you perform single stepping. So you start single stepping by setting trap flag equals to 0. Now if you clear the trap flag, so if you set trap flag equals to 0, means you don't want to perform single stepping, no single stepping, right? So now processor is clearing TF flag here before going to the ISR. So suppose you are running a program. Now here at this point, let's say you want to perform single stepping. So you have set TF equals to 1, and from this part of the program to this part of the program, you want to perform single stepping. So after this you have made TF equals to 0. So now you are executing your program by single stepping, and let's suppose at this point interrupt has occurred. So INT N, some interrupt has occurred at this point. So what will happen? If your TF equals to 1, TF is equals to 1 means you are performing single stepping. Now at this point, if the process is going to the ISR, so then what will happen? This ISR will also be executing in the single stepping manner, but we don't want that, right? Because the main program and ISR are the different programs. We don't know the logic of the ISR, and we are not even bothered about the ISR. It is not the program written by us, right? So we don't want to perform single stepping into the ISR. So the processor is clearing the trap flag here. If it is set to 1, it will clear to 0. Even if it's whatever is the value of TF, it will set it to 0 and then it will go to the ISR. So again, now once you have executed the ISR, you will again come back to the next instruction in the program, right? And then again, here you have set TF equals to 1 at this point into the program. So you want to continue performing single stepping. So when it is coming back to the main program, it has to again make TF equals to 1, right? So while coming back, what processor should do? TF equals to 1 and IF equals to 1? No, because we don't want what was the value initially. It may be TF equals to 0, IF equals to 0, or it may be TF 0 and IF 1. It may be any value, right? So what we want is whatever was the initial value, we get the same value once we reach here. So here in this diagram, before storing the addresses of the IP and CS, processor will store the flag register also into the stack. So processor will push flag register also into the stack. So here, if this is the stack, and suppose this is the starting of the stack, which is represented by SP, then at this SP minus 1 and SP minus 2, flag register will be there. So flag register higher byte and flag register lower byte. Then it will push CS and push IP. So CS higher byte, CS lower byte will be at SP minus 3 and SP minus 4 location. Then IP higher byte and IP lower byte will be at SP minus 5 and SP minus 6 location, right? So this is step number 1. Step number 2. So it will push the flag values and the return address. This is the return address into the stack. So this is flag, this is return address into the stack, and then now it will update IP and CS ka value with the address of the ISR. How to find the address of the ISR? If interrupt number is N, then the ISR addresses in the IVT will be at location N into 4, N into 4 plus 1, N into 4 plus 2 and N into 4 plus 3. Update IP and CS. Now go to the ISR, because this is the value which is there into IP and CS. Execute the ISR on seeing the IRET instruction. Now IRET will do what? Pop IP, CS and flag. So now pop should be in this order only because we have pushed in the reverse order. So now at the top of the stack we have IP. So pop IP first. Then once IP is popped, top of the stack will have CS. So pop CS. Then flag values will be there at the top of the stack. So pop flag register. Okay, so this is how interrupts work. So this IRET, what is the difference between IRET and RET? So this IRET will pop IP, CS and flag, all three of them. But return instruction, which is used at the end of the ordinary subroutine, right? And IRET is used, interrupt return is used at the end of an ISR. So this return instruction will pop only IP and CS. It will pop only IP and CS. But IRET will pop IP, CS and flag, all three of them. Okay, so here in IVT, it has addresses of all 256 ISRs. So this INT 0 to INT 4. So these total 5 interrupts are called as dedicated interrupts. So INT 0 is used for divide error, INT 1 is used when single stepping is there, then 2 is for NMI, INT 3 is for breakpoint, and INT 4 is for interrupt on overflow. And INT 5 to 31, these interrupts are reserved interrupts. 32 to 255 are user defined interrupts. Okay, so now we will see what is the meaning of these interrupts. INT 0 is dedicated for division error. So what exactly happens if the result of the division becomes too large to be stored? Then this interrupt is there. So typically when it happens when you perform divide by 0, then the result will become infinite. So in that case this interrupt is there. But if it can happen in otherwise also, suppose for example if you do a div BL, so in this case what will happen, what it will perform, AX will be the accumulator, 16-bit accumulator divided by BL, which is 8-bit register. Now the result will be stored into AX. So here L and AH, so AH will store the remainder and AL will store the quotient. Now suppose AX is let's say 4000H and BL is 02H. Now if I perform AX divided by BL, so result will be 2000. So which 2000 is quotient and remainder will be 00H. Remainder can be stored in AH, okay, no problem, 8-bit register, 8-bit value. But AL cannot store the quotient value, right? It's a 8-bit register and we are getting a higher value here. So in such kind of cases, this condition is called as divide error. Now INT 1. INT 1 is for single stepping. So whenever you make TF equals to 1, trap flag is 1, then you start single stepping, means you execute the program line by line. You execute one line and then it stops, then you execute the second line, then it stops, and so on. So whenever you press a key, a function is called to execute one line and then stop. So this function is the part of the ISR of INT 1 interrupt, right? INT 2. So whenever the processor is getting interrupt on NMI line, so then the ISR of INT 2 is executed, right? INT 3 is breakpoint interrupt. So what happens in breakpoint interrupt? Suppose you are debugging a very large program. Suppose in your program you have 10,000, 20,000 lines, and when you run it, it is going to give you, so it's not giving you correct answer, but there is no syntactical error, but there is some logical error. So you want to debug it now. So single stepping is not feasible in this case because the number of lines in the program is too large. So you insert breakpoints in your program. So when you run the program, it stops at every breakpoint. So on the breakpoint, you check the result. So if you see that everything is fine, you are clarifying or you are certifying that the whole section up to that breakpoint is correct. So you insert a breakpoint by writing INT 03. INT 04 is interrupt on overflow. So when overflow happens, so overflow happens when your result is out of the range of signed numbers. So this is done by INT 4, right? Now there are two hardware interrupts, NMI and INTR. So when NMI gets an interrupt, ISR of INT 2 is executed, right? But when INTR, this line is getting an interrupt, which ISR has to be executed? Which one do we execute? So anything can be executed here. So such interrupts are called as non-vectored interrupts. Non-vectored interrupts. So we have two types of interrupts, vectored interrupts and non-vectored interrupts. Vectored interrupts and non-vectored interrupts. So here if we get an interrupt at INTR pin, we don't know which ISR is to be executed. So it is called as non-vectored interrupt. So if an interrupt has a fixed vector number, it is called a vectored interrupt. So NMI is a vectored interrupt. So its vector number is 2. Now suppose NMI gets a interrupt from keyboard and this INTR gets an interrupt from mouse. So what happens? The keyboard this one will execute ISR for INT 2 because it is there on NMI pin, and for NMI pin INT 2 is the dedicated interrupt, but the mouse has sent the interrupt on INTR. So MUPI doesn't know what to do. So the device who has sent the interrupt has to provide the vector number also. So such kind of interrupts are called as non-vectored interrupts. Okay, now suppose keyboard and mouse are already sending the interrupts. Keyboard is sending the interrupt on NMI pin and mouse is sending the interrupt on INTR pin. Now suppose if the printer also wants to send the interrupt. So what should we do? These all three are hardware interrupt. We only have 2 pins for hardware interrupt. So should we have one more pin for the printer also? No, we can't have n number of pins for n number of hardware interrupts, right? So we have to have a mechanism. So using which only these pins we can have multiple interrupts. So what happens? So we cannot connect this printer to the NMI pin, right? Because this is a vectored interrupt. It can execute only one ISR, right? So we have to connect this printer to the INTR pin because INTR is a non-vectored interrupt. So it can execute any ISR. So it can execute ISR of mouse also and for the printer also. So we need a device in between. Here we need a device. So which before giving the interrupts to the INTR, these hardwares have to send the interrupt to that device, and then from that device it will go to the processor. So you can see it like this. Suppose this is the processor 8086. It has a vectored interrupt NMI. So let's say here on NMI we had keyboard, and now here on INTR pin, this is non-vectored interrupt which can take, so this is non-vectored which can execute any ISR from 0 to 255. So between this INTR and these hardware devices we should have a circuit. So we have a 8259 PIC, programmable interrupt controller. So what happens if this 8259 PIC has pins from IR0 to IR7 to accept the interrupts. So these lines, let's say IR0 a printer can be connected. So printer can send an interrupt on this, and the mouse, let's say, can send on this. So now it is the job of the 8259 to select any one of the interrupt and give it to an INTR pin. Now suppose it has selected the interrupt which is there on IR0 pin, it has given it to given it at INTR pin. Now it doesn't know which vector number it has, like which ISR it has to execute. So it will ask the vector number on by sending an INTA bar signal, which is interrupt acknowledgement, right? So it will send first INTA bar signal to ask for the vector number, right? So 8259 will send the interrupt on INTR to the MUPI. Now the processor does not know the vector number, so the processor will send an INTA bar, interrupt acknowledgement signal to ask for the vector number. Now 8259 will see who has given interrupt. If it has 2 or 3 interrupts here, it will resolve the priority and it will send the vector number to the MUPI.